Oh my God, mate, I've never disagreed with you more in 46 episodes of Not Another Sports Pod on it. Simone Inzaghi should have resigned 10 minutes after the full-time whistle. The Inter boss should have resigned immediately after that final. Yeah, okay. But I mean, it is odd that Liverpool, if you're talking about a Club World Cup, Liverpool and Barcelona not being there is unusual. Hello, welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number, I think we're still having this, Wilson, as episode number 46, because you're not counting the bonus pod Europa League post-match analysis as a pod, are you? So we're still having this as pod 46.
Yeah, this is a proper pod. We're back to normal schedules. The Europa League one was certainly the emergency Podstocoglou episode. So I think this is what we're doing in terms of we're staying on track. This is number 46. Any bonus pods that crop up will be thrown in intermittently in between the main ones. But it's been a long time, Dave, to do a proper pod because you've been gallivanting around the world in Argentina and, you know, busy flight schedules. And if you are looking on the YouTube channel, you'll see a David Windsor that is definitely a little more rough and ready than normal, I'd say.
Yeah, that's what 24 hours door-to-door and economy at 38 years of age will do to a man, Mr. Wilson. Yes. Look, Ollie and I talked about it pre-pod a little bit, but pretty tired, but let's go, Ollie. Yeah, we got lots of football to talk about. I want to wrap the Champions League final. As you can tell, I'm not quite as sharp as usual. Ollie Wilson wants to talk F1, golf. I want to talk about the Club World Cup because I think this might be the last pod we do before the Club World Cup and plenty more besides. Also, Magnus Carlsen had a meltdown recently in the world of chess. I want to talk about that. But yeah, mate, 24 hours in economy, batters you, makes you question everything about your reality, your life choices, your own existence, and the universe. But I did see Aaron Ramsey in the lounge at Madrid because I paid for an upgrade Madrid-London, which was £86, I believe, and I had a few chocolate croissants and a shower. And I saw Aaron Ramsey there, so I don't know what that means. Aaron Ramsey's pottering around with his agent in Madrid lounge. And having seen Esteban Cambiasso on the way out to Argentina, I feel like it was a natural progression of things sort of not quite the same, not quite as starstruck by Aaron Ramsey as I was by Cambiasso.
He's been cropping up actually on these, especially around obviously the Champions League final. Who remembers this Inter icon? And it blows my mind that we're living in a generation now where there are people that won't know who Cambiasso, especially as people are so pigeonholed on looking at Premier League football and English football only, and wouldn't maybe go back to look at some of the great European sides of when we were growing up. But there are people that are growing up that won't know who Javier Zanetti is, let alone Esteban Cambiasso. I mean, it's weird getting old. We're definitely going to growing into my old man's mentality of like, oh, well, you think he's good. You should have seen Claude Makelele, the original N'Golo Kante kind of thing and all this kind of stuff. So,
Ollie, in Argentina on my final day, I listened to a 20-minute speech about how I'll never understand how Maradona was actually better than Messi from our good friend John Cotterell, who's, he's got a couple of decades on us, I think. And he was telling me how no one will ever understand how much better Maradona was than Messi because of the pitches, because of the heavyweight balls, because of the style of play. He was like, for actual raw footballing ability, it wasn't even close. So yeah, you're entering into that territory.
Was Maradona better, like that much better than every single player around him compared to Messi being that much better than every single player around him? Like, was the gulf between Maradona and the next best player bigger than the gulf between Messi and you're probably going to say Cristiano Ronaldo? And does that also show how much of a generational talent he was? Because rather than there being a couple of people that could be potentially linked with the similar quality of Messi, Maradona stood alone. I mean, we're going off into a Maradona versus Messi debate rather than focusing on current events. But
you know what I think it is, Ollie? Apparently, obviously, we're too young to remember, but the 1986 World Cup, apparently, it was the single greatest example of one footballer dragging a nation or a club from nothing to glory. So Argentina entered that 86 World Cup, not one of the favourites. Everyone else in that squad is very sort of middling, and it's apparently the greatest example of one individual dragging a nation through. And yes, like Messi was awesome in Qatar, I get that, but he didn't, and it was great in the final, and it was the Messi World Cup, but he didn't drag that nation through as Messi did in 86. Whether that's enough to claim someone's a better overall footballer, I don't know.
I found out somebody who's doing probably one of the greatest side jobs in sports commentary at the moment. A good friend of ours, Nigel Adderley, has been put on this job by FIFA to re-record commentary over the old World Cups. Every single game, he'll do like maybe 10 a month. And it's, games, the eventual outcome and all this kind of stuff. So there's probably a bit of acting involved. But you do get to genuinely just go back and relive some of the greatest World Cups. I mean, I don't know if I'd rather go and watch an Argentina game from the 86 World Cup or whether I'd like to see that Italy or that Brazil side from Spain 82 more than anything else. But these are World Cups that were kind of just before our time that actually still permeated into us, I think, growing up as football fans, in the same way that there'll be some people maybe 10 years younger than us that will still kind of have people telling them about France 98 and 2002 and how good Ronaldo was at those World Cups and everything that happened with the French side, and that will still kind of permeate into their early watchings of world football. It's such a great gig, that, to me. You just, all right, I'll do the group stage, 3 games from the group stage this week.
Watching football in general, Ollie. How can we complain, Ollie, when we're watching football for a living? Come on, man. What a beautiful world. Even if it is Deportes Iquique against Colo-Colo, as I've been treated to for the last couple of months. Let's dive in with the good stuff. Let's talk about the Champions League final. Now, look, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, the 3rd of June, so I appreciate we are, 2 or 3 days behind, as is the case on Not Another Sports Pod. Gives us time to breathe, to reflect, to consider. And despite all that breathing space, Ollie, I still feel the same about what I saw. Now, Paris Saint-Germain 5, Inter Milan 0. Paris Saint-Germain winning the Champions League for the first time. Here's one of my hot takes from it, Ollie. You ready? Simone Inzaghi should have resigned 10 minutes after the full-time whistle. The Inter boss should have resigned immediately after that final. There are very few things in football that I believe are genuinely unforgivable. One of which is, as a professional footballer, not giving 100%. Another one is moving to a rival club as a player, moving from a Boca to a River, from a Real Madrid to a Barcelona. I believe that's completely unforgivable. And another thing that I think is completely unforgivable is humiliation on the biggest stage when you are in charge of the company. If the CEO of Thames Water has his company 15 billion in debt and is just complete humiliation, he has to go. He or she has to go. And Simone Inzaghi, he should have resigned straight afterwards, because that was an embarrassment, a humiliation, a massacre on the biggest stage. It was the biggest defeat in a Champions League or European Cup final ever of all time. And he didn't just bring shame on himself and his players, but also on the nation of Italy. I do believe that, because that's how people look at Italian football, even though it's completely unfair, and I personally love Italian football. Another thing that struck me, Ollie, in the fullness of history, the fullness of time, people will forget the players. They'll forget those Inter players that are out there. They will. But they won't forget the coach that led that Inter side into the final. His tactics, his team, his strategy, his motivation, his substitutions, his formation, his reactivity or lack thereof. They won't forget that. Simone Inzaghi has done fantastic things as a coach, and it's unfair in many ways to be viewed like this. But there are some things in football that are simply unforgivable. And losing 5-0 in a Champions League final is one of those. And what happened before, because hopefully now you're going to give me the counter argument to this, Ollie. But what happened before in Simone Inzaghi's career is irrelevant, because when you lose 5-0 on the biggest stage of them all, there can be no justification for that. I'm not saying he should retire as a football manager, but I think he needs to leave Inter Milan, because that was disgusting.
Well, I think he's already in line to be leaving anyway, if the rumours are true. I mean, even going into this game, he's been heavily linked with a move to Saudi footballers. So many more names keep getting linked with moves to Saudi Arabia. I know we see quite a few players coming back fairly quickly, but it's still just weird the impact that that's having on going into summer windows and winter windows as well at the moment. So for him to resign when he probably knows that he's going to be off elsewhere anyway this summer, I think is drawing unnecessary attention and making it all about him, which to an extent it is his fault. You're the man in charge. The head honcho needs to take that responsibility. But I also think it was a lowly performance from an Inter side that were just at the end of the day outclassed. I mean, you can talk about how disgraceful and humiliating it was. And it was a humiliation. Getting beaten 5-0 in a final is embarrassing, and putting up that sort of performance against a PSG side that romped away with it from pretty much the word go is embarrassing for Inter as a club and Italian football to some extent, because it will continue those kind of, they can't attack, even though we've seen this Inter side go hell for leather in the knockout stages this year against clubs. But you still need to recognise that that's an Inter side that's valued at, I think, around about 120 million compared to a PSG side that has had an overhaul. The big names have gone, but they've still spent 430 odd million on that side. And when you look at that in the golfing quality, I mean, to me, this is the sort of result that Manchester City should have had 2 years ago. When you think about the quality of player and the financial gulf between Inter and City. And this is probably what City fans were almost expecting to see. And due to the resoluteness and the fact that this Inter side was that little bit younger, the average age is about 30 odd, isn't it? It's the oldest side, or one of the oldest sides to be fielded in a Champions League final.
2 or 3 36-year-olds in there, Ollie.
Yeah, compared to a PSG side that is one of the youngest sides to ever be fielded in a Champions League final. So I think you're just looking at the end of an era at Inter that unfortunately has ended in a rather spectacular fashion than anything else, because this is a side that's just lost its legs. Now, you can talk about the way that Inzaghi rested a lot of players going into the last game of the season against Como, when, let's face it, the Serie A title was still on the line on that Friday night. Like, if Napoli had fallen, I can't remember who they had now, but it wasn't, I think it was Cagliari they had. It wasn't a big side at all in terms of, it was expected that Napoli would find the result that they needed. But Inzaghi did rest a lot of players. So they've been over 2 weeks, a lot of those players, without, first team football. Whereas PSG, somebody made a very good point, played their last game 7 days ago. So they're still firing and ready. And you see it a lot when we talk about playoff football in this country, whether it's League One, League Two, Championship, etc. The sides that have maybe had to compete to fight to get into the playoffs tend to have that momentum, as opposed to the sides that have booked their playoff spot ages ago and suddenly they're just kind of like going through the motions for the last few games of the season. If you keep up that kind of sharp mentality and presence on a football field going into the most important games, you're still going to feel sharp as opposed to being tired, whereas the Inter players might have already felt a bit leggy with their age, full season, and on the back of it, they've had a hard title fight, which has come to nothing in the end, and then you have 2 weeks rest. It's a really difficult thing to do, to suddenly get yourself back up again to keep going. So I think there are a lot of other factors, and you have to just hail the quality of what Luis Enrique has done with this Paris Saint-Germain side. So lumping it all on Simone Inzaghi, particularly Dave, let's not forget about this, that we were talking about him, and you were talking about him as one of the most underrated managers in European football right now. He's done a sensational job with Inter going into this final. How good is he?
All of that's true.
Should he be somewhere else?
All of that's true, Ollie. But that can sit alongside for me the fact that he should have resigned the day after you lose a Champions League final 5-0. Because it's just such a unique, odd a moment in its own. It doesn't need any context. It doesn't need any justification behind it. Everything I said before about Inzaghi, I stand by. And I see no reason why he can't. By the way, he shouldn't go to Saudi. We can talk about that if you want. But I see no reason why he won't go to another club and have massive success there. He's obviously a top coach. But for me, just losing in the way you did, as I say, there's very few things that are just completely unforgivable, and that was one of them.
That's reactionary then, though. That's reactionary.
Well, welcome to the internet, Ollie.
Exactly, but this is what we plead against. Not having this over-the-top reactionary moment. Let's have a little bit of like mental fortitude and stability. He's taken them to 2 Champions League finals. He won Serie A last season. He almost won Serie A this season. I mean, Simone Inzaghi's legacy at that club, in the same way Lazio, to be honest, as a manager, he was pretty good and was kind of pulling a Lazio side through when he wasn't given the same means to bring in players and have the strength of, say, an Inter side that are coming off the back of Scudetto titles, etc. He's a really good coach and manager, and a good man manager as well. You don't hear about fallings out in the dressing room between he and his players, etc. So I think you just have to look at this at one of those moments where, on that night, it all went wrong. There wasn't the performance there. There wasn't the quality that we've seen from Inter throughout this competition. And unfortunately, this is such a really good, young, hungry PSG side that were ruthless in going forward and took every chance given to them. I mean, Donnarumma had some good saves as well between the sticks, by the way. You know, Inter could have had 2 or 3 on that night. No one is going to really remember those saves from Donnarumma. Everyone's just going to remember the 5-0 scoreline and Ousmane Dembele suddenly looking like the next Ballon d'Or winner, which, when you consider where he's been over the last few years and how he wasn't loved at Barcelona for so long and has kind of won over the Paris Saint-Germain fans very quickly and been exceptional this season.
Ollie,
and obviously,
sorry to interject,
well,
mate. But just I'm thinking while you're talking here, and you're obviously making the case that you're trying to take a deep breath and view this with a sense of consideration and class that's very much the Ollie Wilson way. But just as a standalone result, mate, I mean, tell me a result in football that you think is comparable to this in terms of humiliation on the biggest stage. Because the only one I can think of, mate, and I'm putting you on the spot, whereas I've been thinking about this since the final, really. But the only result that I can think of that is complete humiliation in a standoff one-off game was the 8th of July 2014, Brazil 1, Germany 7. Like that is a similar kind of result. And that wasn't as bad because it wasn't in a final, right? So, but that is the kind of iconic that we're talking about it for years to come. And Luis Felipe Scolari was the Brazil boss at that time. And even though Scolari had massive success before, there was no question that his position was completely untenable after that game. And that's where I'm at with this. That's where I am at with this. And when you think about the 2005 Champions League final, Ollie, with Milan 3-0 up against Liverpool at half-time, what happened in Munich on Saturday night was essentially what could and maybe should have happened in Istanbul in 2005, right? Everyone thought Milan then could go on and win 4-5-6. And they didn't because it was a crazy night and something unique happened. But can you think of any other examples? I'm even going to bring it out.
Yeah, I've got 2.
Go on then.
Two games that were more humiliating and didn't result in managers being forced to immediately leave their club. I'm going to give you 2 dates and see if you can work it out. The 2nd of February 2021 and the 4th of March 1995.
Just give me the dates. You're a hard taskmaster.
All right, okay.
Say the first
and
one.
It's the 2nd of February 2021.
That wasn't a Champions League game, was it?
And the 4th of March 1995. No, but there is one side that is involved in both games.
What's the 1995?
What, the date or the game?
Was that a Champions League final as well?
No.
Okay, go on then. Put me out of my misery.
Okay, Manchester United 9, Ipswich 0. Manchester United 9, Southampton 0. On the 4th of March 95 and the 2nd of February 2020.
Ollie, you know neither of those are comparable.
That's more humiliating.
Oh my God, mate. I've never disagreed with you more in 46 episodes of Not on the Sports Pod, Ollie.
Conceding 9.
Yeah,
a
mate,
goal
in
every
a Premier League
10
game
minutes.
Against Manchester United, that iconic Manchester United team.
Well, the first is an iconic Manchester United team. The second in 2021 is not an iconic Manchester United side.
Okay, but it's still Manchester United. And also, that was a league game, Ollie. There's 38 league games in a season. No, mate, that's not even close. The closest one... No, it's not even close.
When you're talking about the Brazil-Germany game, that is a World Cup, end of a World Cup, which ends a World Cup cycle, which obviously most nations tend to involve their managerial appointments, etc., around a World Cup cycle. So resigning after that game is actually not unexpected anyway, because you'd imagine there could be a change of manager after a World Cup cycle anyway. It's kind of almost an easy thing to do for a manager to go, oh, woe is me, this game has humiliated me and I'm leaving, rather than having this kind of, am I going to stay and am I going to go? Like, am I going to keep the national team job, etc.? That is more likely, I think, after an end of season game like this or the end of a World Cup cycle, that you would see a manager be going either way. So that I don't think Inzaghi has to step away and have this big grandiose, that was humiliating, I need to go. Because he's, as I say, he's probably going anyway. So, and the same thing happened obviously in the World Cup in Brazil in 2016. So I don't see it as being anything apart from a reactionary thing to the moment, which we don't need in either sports journalism or football at this point.
Or not.
Like, it just doesn't.
Okay, but I want to talk about Luis Enrique, but just wrapping up on Inzaghi. Saudi, bro.
Yeah, it will probably happen.
Bro, you're a professional footballer. How much money did you earn? You've been a professional football manager. You got loads of money. At this point, it's just zeros in a bank account. What? You log into your bank account and you can see all the zeros there. You got your property portfolio, your kids, your grandkids. every future generation of families sorted. You could buy villages in Italy with the money you've acquired. Like,
his
why,
stock's
bro?
never been lower though, Dave. His stock has never been lower, so he needs to go and back his fortune right now in Saudi
Arabia. He's got to go
Arabia.
down to South America if he wants to, work away in private. But mate, do you know what I mean? Like, why? Inzaghi? Just take a year off, man. Learn English. Come to the Premier League. What are you doing? I've got less and less sympathy with this. And like, I've said this before on this podcast, but I just don't buy you've got to make bank, bro. And it's, take what's yours and everyone would do it. It's like, no, they wouldn't. Like, he's not working at Starbucks on minimum wage. He's already a multimillionaire. He's already in the top 0.00001%. Like, when people talk about life-changing money, that's like people on average wages doubling their wage or trebling their wage. That changes your life because you can then get a bigger house or have another kid or move countries or do what you want and help out your aging parents. Like, this is not that. This is just greed. Like, let's stop, like, I don't know, man. It annoys me.
Where would he go though? Just if you think about this, right? Simone, I'm not saying I want him to go to Saudi Arabia either. I think that'd be a horrible decision for many reasons, but unless Saudi Arabia obviously wants to sponsor this podcast, and then it's a beautiful place to go. Why not? I mean, the Pro League's getting better.
And I rate it, and Saudi Arabia are the future. And as a former Saudi resident, I've said for a long time on this podcast that the great kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the future. And I personally would not even pack my bags because they're still packed. I haven't unpacked from arriving yesterday, Ollie. I would go right now to Heathrow Airport if needed. So let's just have that out there.
100%. But in terms of the league strength and where Simone Inzaghi is right now in his career, it might not be the worst idea to step away from European football. Inter is going to have this big rebuild, right? Acerbi's 37, Mkhitaryan's 36, Calhanoglu's not got many legs left in either. DiMarco at 27 is still able to get up and down that flank, obviously, and players can continue to go, but had an absolute shocker the other night. Denzel Dumfries has blown hot and cold over the last few years. Thuram and Martinez are obviously a great strike force, etc. But we know that the older players in this Inter side are going to get moved on this season, and they're going to have to kind of rebuild and restructure a fair bit. If you're Simone Inzaghi, off the back of this Champions League defeat, you don't want to be the guy that's in charge of a rebuilding Inter when you think that Milan will have to do better than they have done this season, obviously finishing outside the European spots. You've got the likes of Atalanta, Juventus, Roma and Lazio, and of course Napoli too. It's going to be tough in what is generally a very competitive league anyway for Inter if they are going through and about to go through a rebuilding patch without many financial resources. The one thing they will have at least will be Champions League football to lure some players in. And then where do you go if you're not at Inter? Because if you don't want to be part of a rebuild at Inter, do you really want to be part of a massive rebuild at any other club? Because it would be easier to stay at Inter and start a rebuild than it would be to go and rebuild elsewhere, perhaps in a new league on foreign shores, etc. So if you're Simone Inzaghi, you probably want the opportunity to go into a club that is ready to fight for top honours in their league and maybe in a Europa League at least, or Champions League football. I don't really know what the club is that would allow him to do that at this point in time. Whereas if you go to Saudi, you can shake off the fallout from this defeat, which, as we've already touched on, is humiliating. And then something might open up. Something might open up in the next 6 to 12 months where you can then position yourself to be the guy that steps in a season's time or 18 months' time into that job that you actually want somewhere. And as I say, I can't really think at the moment off the top of my head where that would be. Chelsea rotate managers left, right and centre. I'd love to see Simone Inzaghi on a sideline at Chelsea at some point.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously coming off the
I'll
back
drag
of
you from West London to North London, Ollie, and I'll put out there, how about he goes to Tottenham? How about he goes to Arsenal when Arteta doesn't win a trophy next year? I mean, look, I think I don't think it's valid to say there's nowhere for him to go, because I think there is places for him to go. I mean, we've said this before, but the way that top clubs rotate managers, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, 3 or 4 clubs in the Premier League rotate their top clubs in the Premier League rotate their manager all the time. Pep Guardiola's going to leave at the end of his contract in 2027. So I do think there's football clubs he can go to. I mean, Inzaghi at Tottenham. If Inzaghi went to Tottenham Champions League football, and Daniel Levy gave him a 5-year contract, I'd be looking at Tottenham and thinking, okay,
Well,
maybe you could do it.
You know how managers have a tendency as well to be able to bring some players across with them. Imagine chucking a Barella into the central midfield of a Tottenham, or even a Lautaro or a Thuram as well in the front line, and giving them an actual replacement for Harry Kane. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I mean, I think we touched on Inzaghi at Tottenham the other week, didn't we? We're kind of floating out rumours about where else Inzaghi could go. And Tottenham wouldn't be a bad landing spot, but I'm just saying it doesn't appear that the Tottenham job is readily available right now.
No.
And if the Saudis are willing to drop a ton of money on you, take that for 12 months, step into... I mean, an Arsenal would be great. Like, if you want somebody that's going to have that same Arteta kind of fire on the sideline, but I always think Inzaghi looks, even though he's a wild man, he gets the hair flying around, he's very emotive in his body language. There's still an element of control from Inzaghi as soon as he steps away from the pitch. Whereas we've discussed how Arteta seems to be riding on emotions only. I don't think Inzaghi's a riding on emotions kind of manager, except for his own personal emotions during a game. So Arsenal wouldn't be a terrible fit, and he would come with a winner's mentality of winning in a 38-game season and have some Champions League pedigree to his name as well to maybe get him over the final hurdle. But
I mean, could you give me an example of anyone going to Saudi and their reputation it being enhanced and then coming back to European football and it being a success?
I don't know, Ivan Toney's still going to stick out.
When he scores the winner for England in the 2026 World Cup. And Tuchel and Tony lifting the trophy, mate. Saudi-based Tony and German Thomas Tuchel getting handed the trophy by Donald Trump, with Tony with the captain's armband maybe by then.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the difficult step to take if you do go to Saudi, is that for a lot of people, you just get lost into the wilderness, and that's what happens. But
yeah, okay, let's talk about Luis Enrique. You could make a very strong case that Luis Enrique is currently the best manager in the world. And you can make that case because Luis Enrique at Barcelona, and let's not forget, and time moves quickly, Ollie, and this is 10 years ago now. But in that 2015 season, as head coach of Barcelona, Luis Enrique won La Liga, he won the Copa del Rey, he won the Champions League, the treble. Also went on in that year to win the Super Cup and the World Club Cup, So that was 2015. It was just absolutely astonishing, even by Barcelona's standards. And 10 years later, Ollie, and he's gone and won the Coupe de France, he's won Liga, and he's won the Champions League. So he's done the treble again. So look, I think that you can make a very strong case that he's the best manager in world football. I think that combination of mad intensity and relentlessness and energy, combined with the fact that he has this bank of who he was as a footballer, what he did at Barcelona, this gravitas, this obviously philosophical side to him, and this very human side, which he shared openly about the death of his daughter, and kind of who he is as a man, I think is very, very impressive as well. And I think people buy into who he is as a man as much as who he is as a coach, which increasingly is very important when you're trying to create these human connections with people. I was just doing a brief read on his bio, actually, Ollie. Genuinely fascinating man. He's done an Ironman. He's done an Ironman, Luis Enrique. I mean, it's quite impressive that. That's, for those that don't know, that's I don't know. I think it's a 2.6 mile swim. You finish with a marathon. It's something like a 180 kilometer cycle. Something insane. 13 hours of cardio. I saw this about him as well, which I thought was interesting. When he'd retired, Ollie, he decided he wanted to learn how to surf. So he moved to Australia for a year just to surf. Surfed every day for a year in Australia. Isn't that interesting? Normally you've got these head coaches, they can't let go, and they're football, and they're just workaholics, and what's the next job, and whatever. But Luis Enrique moved his family to Australia for a year, so he could just surf every day. Didn't do a day's work, just surfed every day. I mean, nice if you can get it. You need the financial cushion to do that. But still, I thought that was very interesting as a man. Just turned off football, just surf for a year. So yeah, I think you can make a really strong case that he's the best manager in world football. I think he's got a contract with PSG until 2027. And listen, the age of this squad, Ollie, and the momentum he's built, he's going to look at the next 2 years and think, okay, I mean, I'm at the very least going to win another couple of Liga titles. In fact, that's pretty much in the bank, you could say. And he has the rare luxury that the Spanish clubs don't have, the English clubs don't have, Bayern Munich don't have really. He's got the rare luxury of going into a season, Ollie, I think, and knowing that unless something really bad happens, you've won the league, right? So he can pace out how he plays his side in the league, and pretty much focus entirely on the Champions League, which no other club can really do. Like even Real Madrid, despite their massive success in the competition, they can't just focus on the league because it's expected that they can't just allow Barcelona to win La Liga, right? So I think Luis Enrique is in a very rare position with that Paris Saint-Germain squad that he'll go into the Liga season and he'll think that he's won the league, and not in an arrogant way, but just he'll think that Paris Saint-Germain have won Liga. And so throughout that entire season, his entire focus can be on the Champions League. So he's going to think he can do big things in the next 2 years. And after that, I mean, it's really up to him. Back to Barcelona, Saudi, retire, Manchester City job. Like Pep Guardiola's contract expires in 2027. Who knows what's going on in the Premier League then, but you'd expect 2 or 3 of those massive jobs. Maybe Arteta leaves in 2027, whatever. So, yeah, I think Luis Enrique, best coach in world football right now. What do you think?
Well, the next job surely for him, firstly, is to go to that MLS expansion franchise in Hawaii if he wants to continue the surfing.
I haven't heard about that. Talk to me.
No, that's not actually happening. But if anybody can make that happen for himself, Luis Enrique should be the guy to be able to make it. I think you add into that, he's one of only 5 managers now to win the Champions League with 2 different clubs. When you look at the managers that are in that bracket, and Jose Mourinho, Carlo Ancelotti, these are some of the best managers on the planet. It's not quite the same as the 4 Grand Slams thing that we're talking about with Rory McIlroy, but that is a small group of managers. I will push against slightly your argument about the leagues in the bag and he can focus on the Champions League, because that's an asset that pretty much every PSG manager has had for the last decade. So why did Luis Enrique make it work? What was it about Luis Enrique that was able to handle that in terms of the expectation on the league, keeping players focused to make sure they got the league, and still getting them hungry and tuned up enough for Champions League football? Because that's the thing that's always been the downfall of Paris Saint-Germain. It's always been considered. It was the easy knock to put on any PSG manager and any PSG side, is that they're not tested enough in the league on a week-to-week basis. When they get to the Champions League, it's much more difficult for them to raise their game to compete with the best in Europe. So why and how has Luis Enrique been able to make this adjustment compared to any other manager? And there's been some really good managers, obviously, that have gone through Paris Saint-Germain in the last few years. The key thing for me, for Luis Enrique, is the bravery of the overhaul. When you look at the names that have gone out of this club in the last 2 years since he came in, it's extraordinary the talent that's left. Obviously, Neymar left for Al Hilal, wasn't really much of it anyway with the injuries. Marco Verratti, though, has gone after, the Verratti transfer scandal, not scandal, but furor when he left Pescara in Serie B and decided not to stay in Italy and go to Paris Saint-Germain, and was a stalwart captain leader, the walking yellow card that was Marco Verratti. And it was so surprising, I think, to see him moved on to some extent, because I still felt that he had the ability and quality, but obviously Middle Eastern money was calling for him. Mauro Icardi, who's, can be a problematic guy at the best of the times. Jorginho Wijnaldum, Julian Draxler. This is all in the first year, by the way. Hugo Ekitike kind of was shifted out for a moment just to kind of readjust. Then you look at, obviously, Lionel Messi was moved off to Inter Miami for a free. You go into this season, Xavi Simons has moved on to RB Leipzig, where he's actually doing very well, but yeah, Ekitike ended up going off to Frankfurt. You had Gnabry off to Braga. You had Kylian Mbappe obviously moved across as well. Wan Bernat left on a free.
Let's not skip over the Mbappe one, Ollie, because that a lot of people saying that's like the turning point. I mean, how fair or unfair is it to point this at Kylian Mbappe and say that his maybe work ethic, his mentality didn't quite fit what Luis Enrique has now managed to extract out of this current crop?
Don't think it's that, to be honest. Considering Kylian Mbappe has never had that levied against him until he left for Real Madrid and things have gone wrong at Real Madrid this season, I think that's a very unfair thing to say. What I think you had with Paris Saint-Germain is something that can often creep into sides, which is when you have 1 or 2 key players, there becomes over time that reliance and that idea of, well, Kylian will make something happen. And Mbappe and Messi and players like that are selfish enough, in a positive way, in a good way, that they want to make things happen. So when they receive the ball in desperate moments in games, they're not thinking, give it to somebody else. They're thinking, what can I do to get this side into the best possible moment to shoot and score, and can I be the one that does that? And I think that's something that's crept into so many sides over the years that have had big names in them. And when you've got a Messi or someone like that, particularly at the peak of his powers, you can give it to Messi and he can probably make something happen. You can give it to Cristiano Ronaldo and he probably will make something happen to get you out of jail. That's why those big players have those iconic moments. But if you continue to just have that mentality, other people don't take that individual responsibility themselves. Other people don't look to be the creator and the catalyst. They go, how do I get it into Mbappe so he can make something happen for us? And I think this is just a case of there aren't many, when you look at this Inter starting lineup now, who would you say is the give it to him and he will score player that Paris Saint-Germain have in that lineup? Because I'd argue that all of them can be that, particularly when they brought in Kvaratskhelia this year from Napoli in the winter window. Like that, there are so many talented players that aren't necessarily the key man because it's a group collective, and that's the difference between having the Galactico names. And this is no disrespect to Doué, Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, etc., but you wouldn't put them in that echelon of the superstars. They're great players, but they're not a Messi, a Ronaldo, a Neymar, and Mbappe. And that is the positive, and that's the change that Paris Saint-Germain have had. Because they've gone looking for, I remember when Neymar was announced on the opening day of the season for Paris Saint-Germain a few years ago, well, many years ago now. And he didn't play in the opening game, and they were taking on Amiens, which are a newly promoted side from Ligue 2. But they had a 20-minute special pre-match welcome to Paris Saint-Germain. And that's been the attitude at this club for so long, because it's not just been about results on the pitch, it's about building that brand of Paris Saint-Germain. And you look at what the brand is now, they have the links with the Jordan brand as opposed to just Nike. All the Jordan affiliated merchandise that PSG bring out. There's a lot of things like Paris Saint-Germain shirts and shorts that you see worn just around London, just around Milan and other major cities around the globe. Yeah, so they've breached into that market and done what they've wanted to do as becoming a global brand for the business. And Luis Enrique seems to have gone, right, well, we've got the brand. What do we want on the pitch? And I don't need big names to be able to make this work. I need people that will work and fit into the system I've got. And I think that's what Luis Enrique has done with this team. And there's a bit of stability as well, with obviously the kind of elder statesmen, Hakimi, Marquinhos, etc., which is also very much needed. And you can't take away the defensive ability and the kind of leadership that someone like a Marquinhos brings and gives Luis Enrique's side of having a bit of an authoritarian in the back line is always useful, and then those younger players around. It's superb what Luis Enrique has done. One of the best managers in the world. I don't think that was ever in doubt anyway before this PSG job, but certainly now.
I think it was only in doubt because people always caveat like success of Barcelona or Madrid. People sort of say, "Oh, well, you were at Barcelona when Messi was there." That kind of thing. It's people. I think when
people could do that with PSG, though.
They could, Ollie, but because Paris Saint-Germain never won the Champions League before, yeah, I agree with you. Look, they spent a load of money, right? They spent a lot of money, Paris Saint-Germain, and they had a lot of failed transfers in that time as well, and they just kept upgrading until they got it right. So I do get that, but I just think because if you win it with Barcelona, people say, Hansi Flick has done incredible things with Barcelona, right? But no one's saying he's the best manager in the world because you think, well, you've got Lamine Yamal, you've got the players. When Luis Enrique did it at Barcelona, you think, you've got Messi there, etc., etc. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it packs a different kind of punch.
Well, I think it packs a different punch because he's done it without the MSN era is gone. That's all gone. Like the MMN even MNN.
Yeah, whatever it was.
MMN. Yeah. Because I think it screams more of his quality because it looks like it's a managerial decision that over the last 2 years has paid off. And that's why I think you can't necessarily have that easy, you won it with PSG, they've got all the money and stuff. They do. They really do. But they did it with great players, but after removing all the individuals. And I think that's a great thing to put on this Paris Saint-Germain side. If it remains, that's a different matter because now these great players are suddenly being seen for their individual brilliance a lot more, and winning a Champions League can provide its own problems if players get ahead of themselves or they start to think it's me and all that kind of stuff. But you'd hope that Luis Enrique can kind of keep a lid on that as a manager that's been there and dealt with that sort of thing. And not only that, the connection he's found with the supporters. Obviously that's easier with the success, but you saw the banner that the supporters put out for him at the Champions League final. I mean, it was a beautiful show of like, we are with you, and obviously everything that's happened with Luis Enrique and his family off the pitch is tragic, but it's nice to see that that's reflected and empathised by the supporters in a really beautiful moment with that banner that they put up.
Let's talk about the Club World Cup, Ollie, because this will be our last pod before the Club World Cup. I'm away next week, so we'll pod again Monday, June the 16th. Hopefully we can do Mondays onwards from there. So let's talk about Club World Cup. Now, the Club World Cup is going to be massive. It's going to be absolutely massive. Maybe not this iteration of the tournament, because this is essentially the first Club World Cup. Yeah, there have been Club World Cups before in different formats, in different parts of the world, but this is the start of the Club World Cup proper, in my opinion. Now, for better or for worse, the world is as globalized as it has ever been, and the Club World Cup reflects that. And of course, money will dictate so much, right? But the winner of the Club World Cup receives 97 million British pounds, 125 million US dollars, the winner of the Club World Cup. That is such big money. And FIFA know that if you put that as the premium, everything else will be a trickle down from that. Because your Real Madrid, your Barcelonas, every club in it is just going to see that and think, wow, what an opportunity to make 100 million quid if we can win it. And obviously, those participating that get knocked out in the semis and quarters will have a huge chunk of that money. So it's, it's 406 million pounds, 525 million US dollars participation fee, which is shared based on sporting and commercial criteria between all the clubs involved. So, look, the Club World Cup is absolutely massive. And I think a good barometer of how big this Club World Cup is going to be and is from this edition of the tournament is the fact that Real Madrid were prepared to pay Liverpool the best part of 10 million quid to have Trent Alexander-Arnold playing for them in the competition. And I think that raised quite a lot of eyebrows that Trent Alexander-Arnold had 1 month left on a contract. 1 month left on a contract. And Real Madrid were going to sign him anyway. And they paid Liverpool nearly £10 million to get him out of that contract early so they can have him at the Club World Cup. Because if there's 100 million for winning it and you don't have a right back and you pay 10 million quid and suddenly that right back changes, gives you 5% more in every game, maybe you can win it. So the Club World Cup's going to be absolutely massive. I think the Champions League dominance will always be huge because of the historical impact of how European clubs are. But I do believe that, especially as you see the MLS getting better, the emergence of the UAE, I do think the Club World Cup is going to be absolutely massive in the future. And it starts this year.
I think you're right to some extent with that, in that I think a year or two prior, probably 12 to 18 months prior to a Club World Cup, there will be more players particularly going off to sides in the UAE that are already qualified for the Club World Cup. So if you're saying Al Hilal won the AFC Champions League back in 2021, you've had this slot booked for pretty much 4 years now. So say that happens again, I can only imagine that with the money that's on the line, and if this is as successful as FIFA are hoping and the TV broadcasters are hoping, 18 months prior, if you're, say, I don't know, for not to rain on their parade and everything, but if you're at a Tottenham side, right, and like Champions League football's up in the air in the next 12 months or so, and the league is struggling, well, if a Saudi side that's already in the Club World Cup comes in and I can make a move with 12 months to go, it gives me 12 months to get ingratiated in the club, and then I get a chance to play on the big stage with the Saudi bonuses that are probably going to come with that. And I just wonder if that might be a reason that could attract managers, players, etc. So you might even see these Saudi sides and Middle Eastern sides suddenly stockpiling 12, 18 months prior big names to then be able to go and put on a big show with everybody going, look, forget about the league. We'll give you a load of money for the league, whatever. But if you win a Club World Cup for us, like winning 100 million is fine for us. That's great. It also is going to look great on our resume. And we'll basically give you the 100 million as a squad to go and win that for us if you come in now, and we'll make that happen. And I wonder if that's going to have an impact on those transfer windows 12 to 18 months prior to a Club World Cup. There's a few things that I'm not necessarily... I mean, the trophy's just horrible, isn't it? Like, it's pretty garish. Like, you think about the World Cup.
I'm looking at it now.
Either Jules Rimet or the trophy we have now. I mean, it's such a classy, just one piece, elegantly simple. Same with the European Cup, the Champions League. It's a really elegant, simple design, and this is just it's like a kid's gyroscope with all these rings and circles.
There's a lot of wording on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
because the thing is with the World Cup, Ollie, you can just see the shadow of it, and you know it's the World Cup. Whereas this is, I'm reading it now, Club World Cup, Coupe du Monde, like it's written in, I think, 3 different languages, and then like it's also got all the badges. Like, yeah, it's messy.
Yeah, it's just it's very modern in the worst way, almost, in terms of a trophy. And
because it's new, I can't imagine, because it's a new tournament.
Like, I can't imagine it's going to look nice to hold it aloft. As an individual, would you grab the base? Do you grab the sides? Like the sides, it's going to be then awkward to get high enough above your head. The base is probably going to block out your forehead. If you hold the base, it's quite a small base for what looks like quite an unwieldy trophy. It's going to make, I mean,
I don't even think it should be physical. If you want to live in the future, it should be some kind of AI hologram of a trophy to really mark like your logo. This is what the future looks like. So you've got, some kind of AI hologram, I think, should be the play.
Yeah, and you win an NFT and you get to lift number 1 of 10, for the trophy lift. I mean, I don't even know.
Is it? I mean, look, I don't know exactly how sides qualified for it because it is a bit weird, mate.
It's winners. It's winners of like the AFC Champions League.
No, I get that, but I mean, do you not think it's a bit odd that Barcelona aren't in it and Liverpool aren't in it, for example?
Well, it's all done on the UEFA rankings over the last 4 years.
Yeah, but like Chelsea are there.
Yeah, because they won a Champions League.
Because they won the 2021 Champions League. Yeah, okay. Okay. But I mean, it is odd that Liverpool, if you're talking about a Club World Cup, Liverpool and Barcelona not being there is unusual.
It's unusual, but at the same, I mean, like, what's more unusual? You got like an RB Salzburg
Juventus
there instead of them. Yeah, 8th best ranked side over a 4-year period. In UEFA rankings, so.
When was the last time Juventus won the Champions League? Like, I don't know. Pretty unusual.
It's tough, but it all comes into the league success as well, for instance. So
RB Salzburg are there and not Barcelona and Liverpool.
But it's, again, all down to...
9th best... they're the... because you compete in the Club World Cup because you're the 9th best ranked eligible team in the UEFA 4-year rankings, not because you've won a record amount of... I don't know, man. I think the Club World Cup should be something like you've either won it in the last 10 years or you've won it more than 3 times, and then you're... I don't know.
No, but then we're doing exactly what we're chastising the Champions League for. We're just giving positions based on that's a Liverpool, that's a Barca, etc. And this is the way they've decided to do it. What I find awkward is in the same way that we look at the Libertadores and like Brazil have 9 teams in the Libertadores and Ecuador are lucky if they get 1 kind of thing, is that UEFA have 12 sides. And it's the biggest footballing continent, it's the biggest footballing organisation, you'd argue. It gets more eyeballs as a governing body than any other of these confederations. But 12 spots compared to, 4 for CONCACAF. The African nations only get 4. The Asian nations only get 4. CONMEBOL gets 6, 4 of which are Brazilian, and then River and Boca, which worked out very nicely for CONMEBOL, I imagine. I'm not expecting more than 1 from the Oceanic Conference, of course. Auckland City are in it. And then, obviously, the hosts, Inter Miami, get a spot as well because FIFA suddenly went, well, we've got to have Messi. Just get him in. So, yeah, I find it's heavily weighed in favour of UEFA sides, in that a UEFA side should win it because the number of teams in it, and also then the financial clout that they all have. That doesn't sit right if you want to have a proper global competition for the global game and find out which is the best club side on the planet.
Could be some batterings out there, I'm specifically looking at Bayern Munich against Boca on the second match day in their group, and I'm thinking if Bayern Munich show up for that, it's 5, 6, 7. It really is. I mean, there's some clubs there, Ollie, that I don't know, but I would suggest that Ulsan HD, who are a South Korean football club, they haven't won anything. They're just the best ranked eligible team in the AFC 4-year rankings. I'm guessing that there could be a couple of real spankings out there that make FIFA not look too clever.
I mean, look at And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with PSG after obviously this season, a Champions League run all the way to the end, and what Luis Enrique will think about maybe having a real run at this competition. Which, let's get on to the other point of like continually tiring out legs. I mean, we bemoan clubs like Manchester United going off to Malaysia, the most humiliating thing that I've seen in a long time for Manchester United players, having an open-top bus tour through Kuala Lumpur for finishing so low in the Premier League and having to go through the motions for a few million that will go back into the club, and the players are coming out with the lines of, well, if it's going to help us with transfers, do you really think like 30 million is actually going to help in the modern day transfer world compared to, I mean, it will help a bit, but it's not going to be enough to bring in a great player. That's just, we need to find the other 70 to bring in the players that we need to sort the kind of sinking ship out that is Manchester United.
Talk for an hour on Manchester United. Two men that grew up watching football in the 90s. Anyone that watched football in the 90s, it is. I don't want to talk about it on this podcast, Ollie. It might be one for a summer kind of deep dive when there's less sport on. The demise of Manchester
United. They handed
out
the two most humiliating results in Premier League history, as we touched on already. But if you look at say PSG, are they gonna really care about this that much after this season, or will they see it as right? We can go for the quadruple.
Yes,
and if they do, how are the Seattle Sounders gonna come close to this Paris Saint-Germain side if they live up to what we saw the other night? If they can play anywhere near as close, like. That's going to be an absolute head kicking.
You know
Botafogo will probably hand out a bruising.
You know why it won't be, Ollie? Because that's the third group game. If that was the first group game, I think Paris Saint-Germain... Yeah. Because I do think with these European sides, if you look at the groups, right, there's 3 group stage games. And I do think that, like, if you're a big European side, you just think, okay, win the first 2. Win the first 2, rotate on the third game. And because Seattle Sounders against Paris Saint-Germain is the third group stage game, that's why I think that's a B PSG side. That could still deliver a battering, by the way. But I think that if you look at how... And FIFA are clever. I mean, they've thought about all this. They're not stupid, Ollie. Because, you know, you look at that group, for example, Paris Saint-Germain, Atletico Madrid is the first group stage game. So that's a Champions League semi-final. Do you know what I mean? That's a huge game. And then what they've done, FIFA, is they've very cleverly... Yeah, I don't know. I think the batterings might come, but if they do come, they're in match days 1 and 2, not 3.
Man City against Wydad AC of Morocco.
Is that match day? What match day is that?
Match day 1 in Philadelphia.
Okay, yeah, that's a naughty. That's a 10-0.
Real Madrid against Al Hilal, Hard Rock Stadium, match day 1. Ooh. Yeah, not impressive. I mean, will you watch it? Like, it's all available free, and DAZN have the exclusive rights. They're doing all the production.
What do you mean available
stuff.
for free?
It's going to be available. It's available for free to watch on YouTube. I think over the summer. It's available for everybody. You don't need a DAZN subscription to watch it.
Blimey, so how are they making money on it then?
Well, I think the point is that they are using this to really try and attract more football fans to sign. I think you can also get it by signing up to DAZN without paying any money, and then having like a free account or something like that.
I haven't cancelled that subscription. One of those, which is basically every subscription model now. Like, I'm coming for you all, by the way. Canva, Vimeo. In my to-do list, Ollie, this summer is like to cancel all those subscriptions that just like rob me of 10 quid every month.
Bleed money.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, am I going to watch it, Ollie? Yeah, I am. I'm not going to watch. I'm not going to watch Inter Miami Porto, but I am going to watch I'm going to watch a good chunk of the games. Yeah. You?
Yeah, I'm going to try to. I'm really interested to see how it's going to go. I've got some other work over the summer and stuff, but this is a month of football which has been billed. And I've spouted the lines enough on my broadcasts for DAZN as, you know, the ultimate club competition, which is interesting because for me the Champions League will still always be the ultimate club competition. This is a more diluted field, although could you argue with the Champions League's current format it's equally as diluted these days? Maybe. And are we going to get the same thing as the Champions League where after a group stage we're going to end up with the best sides will end up being in that knockout competition, and that's when business will really pick up? I kind of hope so. But my fear again is still just the legginess of some of these players that have been involved in long seasons and the impact it might have on things like transfer windows and readiness for the next year as well. If clubs are going to see the business side of a club is going to see it as beneficial, but are the managers and players going to see it as a potential negative? I mean, imagine you get clocked in the Club World Cup in a group stage and you do an ACL and you're out for the following season. That's a disaster, an absolute disaster. And I'm still not 100% sure just how serious managers and players are treating it compared to the financial gains. And I've not heard anything to say whether they are or they aren't, but that's a big question mark that I think will be answered with the style of play and the energy levels that we see from some of these sides over the summer.
Also, mate, just looking at the footballing calendar, like La Liga and the Premier League both start on the 16th of August, right? And the final of, and presumably Serie A is the same weekend or maybe one weekend later. But the final's on the July the 13th. So the two sides, and let's say for the sake of argument, it's two European sides that reach the final. I mean, mate, they're gonna have played 5 weeks of football. They're gonna then have to give the players at least 2 weeks off. Then they're gonna have a 1 week, 2 week pre-season before their first Premier League game. I mean, it's hard to see how, unless Guardiola and Maresca and Xabi Alonso are going to use the Club World Cup to rotate and have a look at their whole squad. It's hard to see how those clubs, like if you're Barcelona, Ollie, and Real Madrid have been off all summer at the Club World Cup, and you're Hansi Flick, and you got your whole squad together, early July for a proper 1 month pre-season. It's hard to see how Real Madrid or Man City aren't going to go into next season like hugely disadvantaged.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're Liverpool right now, you're just saying, bemoaning the idea of them not being in this, but this is great.
Or Arsenal.
Man City are going to, you've got time to go and sit back. You can look at some of the players in this competition and see if you can, if there's anybody worth maybe bringing in, but you also then get a chance to sit and settle and see what your squad is. You've got 60 days as opposed to 30 when these sides get back. And obviously they'll be doing stuff while they're out there. But again, you don't really want to be thinking, I'd have thought, about what's going on back home when you're over in the US, potentially going into the quarterfinals, semi-finals of a long, drawn-out competition this summer. As a manager, is you focus on what's happening at home with transfer movement, players coming in. How do you get those players integrated into your side? Do you fly them out and have them training with you, even if they can't play in this competition? Do you have them at home working on other stuff, etc.? I mean, it gets quite convoluted in terms of the logistics, I think, for some of these clubs. And if you're not in it, I see it as being a benefit right now.
Ollie, forgive me, I was on a plane. Talk to us about all other sport that went on this weekend in the next 5 or 10 minutes, if you can squeeze it in.
Well, beautiful moment at Wembley. Absolutely dramatic National League promotion final. It's not a playoff final, apparently. It's the promotion final. Oldham Athletic against Southend United. Southend United and Kevin Mayer, who've been involved in a record number of games together. The former Southend player, now Southend manager. In the season, he had his testimonial just a week before the playoff semi-final. Kevin Mayer, his side went to Oldham to take on Mickey Mellon and Oldham Athletic. Oldham Athletic, the first ever Premier League side to be relegated all the way down to the National League. And after being away from EFL football for about 3 years, Oldham winning it in extra time in an absolute thriller at Wembley Stadium, the highest attended promotion final in the history of the National League, over 54,000 fans at Wembley, which is
just I mean, for context, Ollie, I mean, that is, so what's that, the fifth tier of English football? Yeah. Ollie, I mean, Spain, Italy, Germany, they can't get that. 54,000, massive numbers. I mean, the depth of football fandom in this country is absurd, isn't it? Right the way down the pyramid.
It's not a cheap ticket either. It's not one of these like, oh, we've sold them for £2 and we can get 80,000 in or something like that. No, this is kind of full price tickets, 30, 40 odd quid minimum, selling, as I say, over 54,000 at Wembley, which was spectacular. Oldham have battered their way through the playoffs. They've been so good. They put 3 past Halifax. They were dominant as well against York City and smashed them in that. Southend have kind of gone through a slightly rockier road where they came back against Rochdale from 3-1 down to go through. They then had the penalty shootout against Forest Green Rovers and looked like they were going to win it, had scored early and then fell behind. It went to extra time and Oldham was just too strong in the end, able to get a 3-2 victory. So Oldham Athletic back in the Football League, which is great. Mickey Mellon, who's had success in playoffs before at the EFL level, and obviously has been a good EFL manager along with the National League as well, getting them back promoted, which is really nice. There are 2 big clubs that you would consider being Football League sides, I think, and it's good to see Oldham back up where they belong, at least in the 72. Then we had the Women's US Open in the golf. I just want to, rather than getting too into the woods with what actually happened with Maya Stark's victory and the near comeback from Nelly Cordo, who's the world number 1 and kind of plays that similar golf that we think about with Scottie Scheffler, I want to ask you about things like pace of play, because golf get slammed, Dave, from people that don't necessarily watch it as being a slow game to watch and kind of hard to watch if you're not really into it, which I get. I always argue that you can bounce around a golf course and there's always some action going. So the broadcasters have no excuse to not be just showing shot until you get to the tense moments that you do want to kind of let breathe and sit on for a bit longer, etc. But Charlie Hull, who's an English golfer who's made kind of a lot of headlines over the last few years with her frustration at pace of play, with the fact that like she was there signing autographs with a cigarette kind of hanging out of her mouth and all this kind of stuff. She's a person that says,
if you haven't seen that clip, go and watch it, because I think Ollie and I traded this clip a couple of times. Smoking's bad for you. It will chop years of your life, 100%. But look at that clip and tell me it's not one of the coolest things you've ever seen.
Yeah, and like she's made headlines for many reasons. She's very kind of just blunt and in your face with it. And it was interesting. She was in a rather slow group with Nelly Corder and I can't remember the other person that was in the three ball over the first 2 days. And there were points where things like Charlie Hull had putted out on a green and she just walked off to the next tee box because her playing partners were taking so long over shots. Rounds were taking 6 hours or so to complete. That's a quarter of a day to get around an 18-hole golf course as a three ball. That should be a 4-hour time. But it was also a bit odd to see her kind of doing these sorts of things, walking off and sitting down, or visibly kind of mumbling and groaning and shrugging her shoulders while other people are putting and getting visibly frustrated by that. And for me as a professional athlete, you have to respect other people's processes, particularly in something like golf, where, yeah, it's not good that people take their time and seem to be endlessly analysing things. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of money on the line, particularly at a major, the Women's US Open. And if you're being held up by groups in front anyway, you might as well take that time rather than being sat on a tee box waiting. And Charlie Hull plays better when she plays fast, so I understand that, and so it's detrimental to her. But you do have to, rather than like kind of throwing these hissy fits around the golf course, which I don't want to make it sound too posh, but it's a bit kind of unbecoming more than anything else. So just showing a little bit of class, isn't it? Or am I wrong? Am I being too kind of, we need to show more respect for each other in the game of golf rather than kind of having these kind of, I'm going to go and sit down over here while you play and all this kind of stuff?
Let me take it a little bit more macro, Ollie, and say that the speed of any sport is now crucial to its success for future generations. And cricket, that's a slow sport, right? And what have they tried to do in the last 10 to 15 years? The cricket authorities have realised that. They tried to make it shorter, snappier, faster, more dynamic, more exciting. Snooker, you know, they've tried different formats of the game. Even things like chess, and I actually do want to talk about chess in a minute with Magnus Carlsen, but they tried to introduce like blitz chess and speed chess. And so any sport now that you're trying to sell as a product has to be quicker and sharper and shorter and more exciting. And why does it have to be this? Because that's the way people consume content in 2025. You scroll your phone, you look at, you know, the most beautiful human that ever existed. It only captures your attention for like 3 seconds. Then you're looking at a video of an elephant attacking a grizzly bear. Again, it's like 2 seconds your attention span. Next. Watch anyone scroll their phone. That's pretty much what you'll see. So you're competing with that. So everything has to be quicker. Is there still a place for the decorum? And obviously Ollie's like a golf purist, and we cannot finish this pod without Ollie talking about his charity golf day, by the way, because I believe it's coming up pretty soon, 2 or 3 weeks. But sports, unfortunately, need to survive, and to survive, they need to be shorter and snappier. So you're in that kind of odd position, Ollie, where you can't alienate the core fan base, which is the fan base that is in golf and watches golf, for the sense of decorum and the measured approach, and they've got the time and they want to see all this stuff. But you're also trying to keep new audiences as well. So I guess that's the macro of like why sports should lean into the quicker side of things. Do I think it's okay to act like a stroppy teenager and sort of walk away in a huff? No, I don't. But anyone who smokes on a golf course on telly is good by me, Ollie. I just think it's absolutely hilarious.
Are you like Jimenez then when he had the cigars on the PGA Tour while he's going round? He's got a cigar in the mouth and just puffing away. I mean, I get it. Like I said, we want more characters in the game and all that kind of stuff. And it creates a talking point, which is good for the women's game because people will be noticing it more. Like Maya Stark doesn't necessarily catch eyes and headlines, but Charlie Hull sat complaining and being visibly frustrated all over the golf course for 2 days certainly makes more of an impact and a splash generally on the press. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm rocking a hard place because I really like Charlie Holt. I think she's a really good golfer, and I think she's a great character and ambassador for the game.
Does she smoke, Ollie, because she's addicted to cigarettes, because she thinks it looks cool, because it's part of her brand? What's going on there? Because she doesn't need to be smoking like when she knows the cameras are there, does she?
No, but I think she just likes the odd cigarette every so often. She's not. She says like she's not like a big smoker or anything, but it's also like a stress thing for her. I mean, look, when you're putting and a putt is worth a few £100,000, a little cigarette probably takes the edge off quite nicely. To be honest, you know, we've all been there at some point in our
Ollie
lives.
Wilson outside Peeber after a stressful week of work in Argentina.
It's after the highlight show. That's what does it, man. That highlight show. You need a 20 deck
Ollie,
of Marlboro Reds after that.
You know that Ben Affleck meme where he's outside some kind of building and he's got a cigarette? Have you seen that? Like, and his face just looks like, just the stresses and strains of life are just all on his face, and he's got a cigarette. It's like, as I say, like, I'm not a smoker, and you shouldn't smoke, but like anyone who's touched a cigarette in their life knows that there is a sense of like decompressing. So yeah, there's something there.
Scotty Scheffler completely dominant this week at the Memorial. The Memorial was hosted by Jack Nicklaus, one of the greatest golfers in the world. Rory McIlroy didn't even tell Jack that he wasn't going to turn up and play, which apparently was a bit considered rather rude in golfing circles. And this is where we get to the point of like, that's considered rude by Rory, the fact that he's decided that he's not going to play in the Memorial this weekend and not spoken to Jack Nicklaus. Yet we're kind of loving the fact that Charlie Hull sat there, you know, doing that. And we're getting to kind of, well, where are we? Are we talking about respect and etiquette, or are we talking about like the new line of, look, I'm an athlete, I don't need to talk to the press, I don't need to do this, I don't need to do that. So that was kind of my gripe with golf this week. Oscar Piastri winning in Spain in the F1, but the big moment was Max Verstappen having to give up a position to George Russell for what was deemed an illegal overtake. So he's giving up the position to Russell at a corner, and then he decides not to turn into the corner and take the left-hand turn. Instead, he cuts straight across George Russell and tries to ram him off the road in utter petulance. And this is, I've backed Max Verstappen for a long time in terms of some of the altercations he's had on the racetrack. But this one was like genuinely childish.
And he apologised as well, right? Because I remember flicking on BBC Sport in the segue between flights, and that was like the headline. He apologised.
It was one of those apologies without really an apology. It was still pretty kind of, you know, I was frustrated. It wasn't the right thing to do, but I was really annoyed. There's always that little caveat at the end of the apology, which, yeah. And I think what's happened is the Red Bull media machine has clicked into gear and been like, you need to go out there and, you know, oh, I've let myself down. I've not done the right thing. At the end of the day, and let's not be too silly about this, you know, back in 2021, Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton collided at Monza in a pretty slow corner. And Verstappen's car went over the top of Hamilton's, and his right rear wheel was just about like inches above Lewis Hamilton's head because of the halo protection that they now have. And then when it came to rest, it was on top of Hamilton's head slightly. And if Max Verstappen puts any sort of pressure on the accelerator, that's a Formula One car accelerating on Lewis Hamilton's head and probably kills him. And that's at a slow corner. Now, this corner between Russell and Verstappen is a much faster corner than what we saw with the collision between Hamilton and Verstappen in 2021. And they've decided, well, Verstappen's decided to bump into Russell. And you don't know exactly how that corner's going to react and how the two cars colliding is going to react together. And it's very, very easy for serious injuries to happen. These are still cornering at 70, 80 miles an hour at times around some of these bends. More than that at the high-speed corners, obviously. It's just playing with people's lives at some points when you're doing stuff like this. And that's really something the FIA should look quite heavily into for intentionally causing an incident. Because that's genuinely flirting with disaster, because you just don't know what's going to happen when you come together with somebody.
When is your golf day, Ollie?
The 19th.
You've told me this a million times. Okay, so we will pod before then, because we're going to pod hopefully Monday, June 16th. So all right, we'll talk about that then. Let me talk about chess momentarily, because it's very rare that chess is going to make it onto Not On Sports Pod. There was a moment that you might have seen, if you just kind of aware of these things. But basically, Magnus Carlsen, the greatest chess player in the world, he basically lost a game of chess against Gukesh Domaraju in Norway. And after losing, he slams his hand on the table. Now, this might not seem like a big deal in many sports, but in the world of chess, this like blew up, millions and millions of views, like viral sensation. He loses this game of chess, and then he smashes his hand down on the table, and the chess pieces kind of shatter like this in front of an audience who do not know how to react, by the way. They've never seen anything like this before. And then, I mean, Magnus Carlsen in some ways is kind of like the Ronnie O'Sullivan of chess, because he's always saying, I don't know if I'm in love with this anymore. What am I doing? Why am I here? And that's essentially what he said in the interview afterwards. I don't know. It's like it's a sport that just doesn't get many views, or nobody really cares about chess, but someone smashes their hand on the table, especially someone who's a household name like Magnus Carlsen, and it raises a few eyebrows. Don't know whether you've seen it, Ollie, but yeah.
I've not seen it, but what do you think the fallout should be? I've just mentioned that Max Verstappen is trying to almost potentially kill people on Formula One tracks. I've mentioned about golfers having hissy fits on the course and being sat down on tee boxes and frustrated with pace of play. So in the world of chess, what do you think happens to a Magnus Carlsen when he does something like this? Because again, we're talking about the etiquette and how you handle yourself in the sporting arena, which is as much as anything, showing respect for your fellow players, etc. To me, this seems like the equivalent of not shaking somebody's hand after the round of golf.
Yeah, I mean, he does shake his opponent's hand, by the way, as he walks off. But clearly, I take your point totally. I think with something like this, the reality is, and the very, very few sports stars can say this, Ollie, chess needs Magnus Carlsen more than Magnus Carlsen needs chess. And there are so few individuals in any sport that can say that. There's no footballer that can say that. No footballer on the planet that can say that, right? Because even the best footballers in the world, Lamine Yamal, like you can these footballers get replaced. But chess needs Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen doesn't need chess anymore. He's done everything in the chess game. He's got his own chess app that brings in, millions a year. He's got all these brand deals, sponsorship deals. He's a married man. Like he doesn't need this anymore. So you're in this really precarious position where should someone be slamming their hand on the table after they lose a game of chess? Absolutely not. I mean, Magnus Carlsen is not a teenager, by the way. He's like well into his 30s. So this is poor behaviour, obviously.
But isn't this, again, what we like from athletes in terms of showing that emotion and frustration? I mean, this is like the post-match interview where the manager goes off. This is the Kevin Keegan, I would love it, just love it, of chess. Like this, and this is good for chess, isn't it? The fact that this never happens. This is the biggest star in chess, and suddenly he's going viral around the world. Not quite on the same algorithm as me, unfortunately, which is why it hasn't crept across my Instagram. But
it depends whether you're following or for you. Like the for you is basically like your brain's about to be destroyed. Like if I could never click on for you in my life, that would be great. You've got to stick to the following.
But this is the eyeballs and attention that surely something like chess wants. The sponsors all love it if there are sponsorship logos in the background and stuff like that. So rather than seeing Magnus Carlsen as basically a human chess robot, and I've lost, and okay, I walk away from the table, it's also nice to see if he's saying that he doesn't, he's lost the love for the sport a little bit, he doesn't need it anymore in his life. That screams something else. Getting that emotive when he knows he shouldn't be, when he's held his emotions for all these years. Being that emotive around losing shows there's still something there. And there's that desire to want to win every single time. That's kind of that good Jordan psychopath mentality, the Michael Jordan of chess.
Yeah, but it's also... So Carlsen's long said that chess is too long and boring. So there's classical chess, which is what everyone knows chess to be, right? But what's been popularised in the last 5 or 10 years, including on Carlsen's chess app, Magnus, is like this blitz chess and speed chess and all these different variations of the classical game of chess that are just quicker. Like they're just quicker, more dynamic, more exciting. So, after this loss, he says, I have no desire to play what he calls classical chess, which is almost kind of like sneery, isn't it? Like at the sport that's made him so rich and famous as well.
Doesn't classical chess just level the playing field for others? Because Magnus Carlsen can probably see moves faster than anybody else, which is why he wants it sped up. Whereas classical chess allows somebody to think more and ponder, okay, well, he's doing that, I'm going to do this. And isn't that therefore a better game of chess to watch? In the same way cricket. We touched on cricket a moment ago and how that's changed so much. But like watching players go out and just slog in a T100 or a T20 isn't that interesting. Watching somebody tactically play the mental, physical game of being stood out at their wicket, defending it for 6 hours in a day, dealing with the variety of deliveries that come in from fast bowlers, spin bowlers, swing bowlers, and still being able to just clock up runs over an afternoon without and staying in to make 100, 150. It's way more impressive than watching somebody make 50 or 40 balls in a slog fest. So again, like Magnus, you may want to see that blitz chess and sped up chess, but I prefer and think it's more admirable if you can go toe to toe, eye to eye with somebody over a longer period of time, which is a better match of wits and skill than anything else. You know, you could have that thing in your brain where you can see moves faster than anybody else, and that's fine, but that's almost like, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a fair advantage. Well, I guess it's fair because you might be born with it naturally or something, but allowing somebody to have the same pace of thought as you over a longer period of time, almost, or the same level of thought over a longer period of time, I think is a greater match and a greater testament. And Magnus, as you've kind of touched on before, has reached the very top of this chess game.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see that other people can compete.
Yeah, sure. Else. And what is also interesting as well is you'd think that chess is not a game or a sport that you think you could be at the top at 50 or 60, and you actually can't. If you look at like the average age of chess champions, you do kind of peak in your early mid-30s, which is actually interesting because you'd like to think that's something you could be great at 50, 60, 70. It's actually not true because your brain's at its sharpest. And also, don't forget, by the way, that during a game of classical chess at the very highest level, these people, they burn like 3,000 calories, which seems absolutely insane, but just the sheer like stress and emotion involved. Look, Magnus Carlsen's been at the top of every form of chess for like a decade, so like he doesn't owe the sport anything now. He's the best at classical chess, he's the best at blitz chess, etc., etc. Yeah, look, chess needs all the eyeballs, and I thought it was a fun one. But it is funny how different sports have different barometers for a meltdown, because like just banging the table makes massive news. Right, any other business?
No, I think we're all done and dusted. I want to see a Jose Mourinho, Magnus Carlsen chess match and see the reaction of a Jose after being defeated by Carlsen and see what that does for the eyeballs of chess, man. Because if you think banging the table when Mourinho upends the whole board over somebody is way... Oh, what would be... Sorry, this is an on-the-spot question. We'll finish with this, I reckon. What would be your ultimate chess match of sporting arena? Like, who would you like to see? Like, for instance, rekindling the Pep Jose rivalry over a game of chess or something like that.
I'll reframe the question and say I'd like to see it as chess boxing. Have you seen this? What's it called? Is it boxing chess or chess boxing?
Chess
Very
boxing,
few clubs in the world. There's one actually in North London. And what you do is you have like a round of boxing. So you have a round, and then you sit down and, I don't know, you have like 5 moves or 5 minutes of chess. Then there's another round of boxing and then chess. And I just think that is the most beautiful paradox between the actual physicality and the brute force of boxing and that kind of methodical, analytical genius of chess. I think it's absolute genius.
Do you win if you knock them out?
Oh, it's a great question, Ollie.
Or is
talk
the aim
for 30
to
seconds
not
while I
knock
just
them
look at
out?
the rules.
Yeah, is the aim to not knock out your opponent, but just daze them enough that they can't make any good, decisive moves in the chess game? Do you have to win the chess or the boxing in chess boxing?
All right. The match consists of 11 alternating rounds. There's 6 chess rounds, which is 3 minutes of chess. Then there's 5 boxing rounds. The match always starts and ends with the chess rounds. The boxing rules, but how to win. A player can either win by a knockout or technical knockout in boxing, checkmate in the chess, or judge's decision if there's no knockout or no checkmate. So the aim of the game is either to knock out your opponent, get the checkmate, or, I guess, judge's decision. I mean, that is absolutely...
I mean, you could just be a really good boxer and then you'd win at chess boxing.
Yeah, there must be rules. Like, you can't have, like, Tyson Fury going against Magnus Carlsen, and then it's whichever you start with. But I think you start with the chess, so maybe Magnus would be all right.
Yeah, but then that's the time thing. If you're Tyson Fury, you just take as long as you can over each move to draw out that first 3 minutes.
Must be rules about that. But yeah.
And then you go hell for leather in the boxing.
Let me just ask ChatGPT one more question. How many chess boxing clubs?
But I'd like to know the kind of two great sporting icons you'd like to see then in this chess boxing arena to rekindle a rivalry?
I'd have to think about it, man, because you can't have like a Messi. Like, it has to be someone that physically could survive that round of boxing, and yet equally you feel has and maybe Eze at Palace, because he's like a chess player, but he is also like an athlete. So if you could train him at boxing, maybe he could kind of survive the round of boxing and then win the chess. I mean, he's the closest to an athlete that also is a chess player. I mean, mate, there's not many at all.
What about North London derby managers? Because I reckon Ange would be a great like drunken boxing kind of guy, just swinging, and Arteta would be a little guy who's getting underneath. And I reckon they're both reasonably tactical. Like Postecoglou would be like no holding back. We're not defending the Queen whatsoever. We're going to leave the King open. We're going all at it. And Arteta would be this kind of, all right, I've built a formidable defence, but I'm just lacking like a bishop that can really take the game to somebody, or a castle that can move and be aggressive and get that final victory. And then they're just swinging at each other. And Arteta's like, as I say, getting up and inside.
Arteta would be complaining though, and he'd be sort of saying, yeah, he's won technically and that kind of thing.
I always win chess boxing in the second round.
Yeah.
I always win chess boxing in the second round.
We've got 110 minutes without talking about Ange. He might get sacked this week, by the way. Let's end on Ange then, Ollie. Do you think he should be sacked, and do you think he will be sacked this week?
I don't think he should be sacked. Oh, no, that's tough. Yeah, he probably should go. The league's the bread and butter at the end of the day. You can't be that bad in the league, even if you've won a trophy. But I think it's the best way to go for him. He's vindicated, and if he goes on to great success elsewhere, he makes Tottenham look rather foolish, but Tottenham get to kind of hit a restart with Champions League football, so it works out for everybody. And then comes Simone Inzaghi.
How fun would that be, Inzaghi at Tottenham? Do you think Inzaghi would see that as a massive step down, by the way?
Yeah.
It would be a massive step down from Inter, wouldn't it? But it would be if Inzaghi went to Tottenham, which it's pretty sure signed and sealed, isn't it, for Saudi? But like, if Inzaghi did go to Tottenham, that would be him really challenging himself, right? Really challenging himself.
I think he gets so annoyed with the fact that he's gone from an Inter side where you don't have the same financial resources as so many other European clubs to go to a Tottenham side in the Premier League with Champions League football, where you probably get given less money to work with than that Inter side. And I think that would irritate him more than anything else. I think the clash between him and Levy could be a big problem in like, I want this and this and this. And Levy's like, well, you can have a little bit of that and a little bit of this more than anything else. But if you think about it in some way, like Champions League football and Champions League football, sure, leagues campaigns this year very different, but great stadiums, both of them, albeit San Siro is obviously the best stadium in the world, but Tottenham Stadium is sensational as a modern build, of course. Really passionate, loyal fan bases and great local rivalries. There are a few similarities between those clubs that would have
12-1. Got Thomas Frank evens Marco Silva at 5-1. I imagine it's a Thomas Frank or a Marco Silva, but yeah.